Hello everyone, this is Simply Put Finances, a show where we discuss money and how to use it in our homes. I'm Spark, your host, and welcome to my blanket fort. Let's get started. Today is a brief conversation regarding expense tracking and reconciliation, specifically reconciling our accounts. What do I mean when I say reconcile our accounts? What I'm really talking about here is how to protect ourselves from theft. Identity theft, people taking our cards, people hacking into our accounts, anything like that. The bare minimum for reconciling your accounts means that at least once a month, you are examining each of your bank statements and your credit statements. And what you're looking for is for anything that looks out of place or any expenses that you don't recognize. If you find an expense that you don't recognize, track it down. What this means for my family is if I see an expense that I don't recognize, I will go to each member of my family to see if any of them recognize it or know where it came from. 99% of the time, I can track it down that way, and I find out that the expense, though not made by me, was perfectly legitimate. However, what you're looking for is that one expense that you don't recognize and nobody knows where it came from. That's why we reconcile our accounts. We're checking to make sure that our accounts have not been compromised, that bad guys don't have access to them. So for an example, let's say this is your bank statement. This is just a random sample that I pulled off the internet. What you would do is that you would start at the top and you would just work your way down each expense, item by item, and making sure you recognize each of those expenditures. Let's say that this is yours and you're going through this line by line and you find one that you do not recognize. And you go around and you ask each of your family members and you look back at your calendar on February 16th and you do an inventory. Where was everybody? What did we buy? What did we spend? Did we order anything online that had a delayed charge? Anything like that. If at the end of the day, you cannot determine where this expense came from, it might be a fraudulent expense. If you read this specifically, it's talking about a cash withdrawal. So what this might mean is if nobody in your family recognizes this, nobody in your family went to an ATM, nobody cashed out money anywhere, 1 or 2 or even 3 days before this date, then we're at risk of having a compromised account. We're dealing with identity theft. Identity theft is extremely common, and the odds are that several of you watching this have been victims of exactly what I'm talking about. I have multiple times, which is why I'm making this video regarding reconciling your accounts. How did I find out that I was a victim of identity theft? The first time, it was through exactly what I'm telling you. I reconciled my accounts, I noticed the problem, I tracked it down, found out it wasn't me, called into the bank, and got it all sorted out. And because I did that in a timely manner, and I'm talking about within a month of it happening, they refunded my money, I didn't lose anything. Now, the risk you take by not reconciling your accounts on a regular basis is that somebody might take your money or use your money fraudulently, and if you don't get to it in a timely manner, the bank might not be liable for anything, and you might just have to eat that loss. See, banks are only required to refund fraudulent expenses up to a certain time limit. Now, what is that time limit? You're going to have to research that on your own. It's probably dependent upon the laws of where you live and the institution that you're banking with. However, if you can just stay on top of it at least once a month, then you're very likely to be within that window of the bank reimbursing the fraudulent expense. And that's why we said the bare minimum in reconciling your accounts is doing it once a month, going through and checking all of your expenses. If you have 2 credit cards and a debit card, that means when you reconcile your accounts, you're going to need to check all 3 statements. Your checking account statement and both credit card statements to make sure that those cards have not been used fraudulently. Now, this process of reconciliation can be aided by expense tracking. And what I mean by that is knowing your money. You've probably heard the old adage, know thyself. Well, I'm saying know thy expenses. You have to know where your money is going or it will leave you. It's the very nature of money. How many of us have ever opened our wallet or logged into our checking account and seen less money in there than we thought we would? Probably all of us. It's kind of the nature of being an adult. Expense tracking is used to help mitigate that issue. If you track every single dollar that you spend, then you always know where your money's going. So the act of expense tracking is simply put as tracking all of your expenses. You can do this any number of ways. You can do this with an app, you can do this with a notebook, you can do this however you want. I personally use Google Sheets. In fact, I have a whole series of videos on how to do that. If you were to jump into my channel, you'd see those there. I incorporate my expense tracker in with my budget. And so for me, I have it currently set up where I run my budget, keep my expense tracker, and reconcile my accounts all together. And if that sounds interesting to you, again, links in the description down below to watch that series. But again, this expense tracking needs to lead to at least once a month reconciliation of your accounts. And then if you have an expense tracker, it makes it really easy to reconcile your accounts, because then all you have to do is look at your expense tracker and look at your bank statements and make sure that you don't have anything on one that you don't have on the other. So for example, if this was your expense tracker and you have all of these purchases, then you would just compare it to your bank statement and make sure everything matches and that nothing stands out as being not you or anyone in your family. So that's it. Simply put, one of the easiest ways to avoid having your accounts compromised and money taken from your accounts fraudulently is to reconcile them at least once a month. Look for any fraudulent expenses or money transfers that you did not personally authorize. Good luck. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description down below. See ya. Oh my gosh.